Every day we make decisions that impact our health. How do you know if you are making the right decision? Are you shortchanging your health?
Today, we'll go over 3 areas you need to focus on for optimal health. We'll talk about the best foods to eat, but also how diet alone can't provide all the nutrients you need and where you can get them.
We'll discuss the balance of mind, body, and spirit. What kind of self-care do you need every day to be balanced?
Finally, we'll get into what you need to know when you go to your doctor. What health tests and screenings are most important? How do you ask for the right thing?
All this and more on today's Be Healthistic.
Welcome to Be Healthistic, the podcast that's more than just health and wellness information. It's here to help you explore your options across traditional and natural medicine so that you can make informed decisions for you and your family. This podcast illuminates the whole story about holistic health by providing access to the expertise of Dr. Steve and Drew Sinatra, who together have decades of integrative health experience. Be Healthistic is powered by our friends at Healthy Directions. Now, let's join our hosts.
Hi, folks. If you like what you hear today and you want to listen to future conversations on all things integrative and holistic health, subscribe to our podcast at BeHealthisticPodcast.com. Also, check out and subscribe to the Healthy Directions YouTube channel, which features video versions of our episodes plus extra videos you won't want to miss. And finally, we have more with me, Dr. Drew Sinatra, my dad, Dr. Steve Sinatra, and other health experts at HealthyDirections.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Be Healthistic. Today in the show, my dad and I are going to discuss a topic that's especially important to address right now. Are you shortchanging your health? Are you missing out on opportunities to be as healthy as you can because you're not making the right lifestyle choices that can optimize your health? Let's dig in and talk about it. My dad and co-host, Dr. Steven Sinatra, joins me today. Welcome to the show, Dad.
Hey, it's good to be here, Drew.
Well, today is going to be all about lifestyle medicine, things that people can do that are free at your home. You don't have to spend lots of money to do these things that can make a huge difference in their health. And I can tell you, as an integrative doc, someone that practices functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, I could not practice medicine without what we'll be discussing today, which is lifestyle medicine. It's an integral part of what I do. And I feel like if there's any doctors or practitioners listening that are into functional medicine or naturopathic medicine or integrative medicine, they would agree that this is it. This is the main chunk of the medicine that we can help so many people with.
You're absolutely right, Drew. When it comes to cardiovascular disease, it's all about lifestyle. In other words, what you put in your mouth, how high your blood pressure goes, how much stress you're under. All these aspects are lifestyle, how much weight you put on. So when I practiced cardiology on a day-to-day basis, it was all about getting people in the right lifestyle to help prevent heart disease. So we're on the same page.
And there's no better time than now to start these things. We've got COVID. We're obviously in this long haul with COVID, and we know about the comorbidities making you more susceptible to getting sick and dying from it. So there's no better time than now to talk about these things.
Correct.
Well, why don't we jump into diet and nutrient depletions and sort of go route there first?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a proponent, as you know, of the low sugary diet, the low carbohydrate diet, especially in COVID. I mean, it just makes sense. And the whole aspects about inflammatory coronary artery disease has to do with inflammation of blood vessels. I mean, we all know that. I mean, it took us decades to realize that, but the main indicator of inflammation, in other words, the sine qua non of inflammation is blood sugar. In other words, the higher your blood sugar, the more inflammation you get. Now, look, when I became a doctor, years ago, decades ago, we used to think that having a blood sugar less than 100, fasting blood sugar, was really good. Mm-hmm. Guess what happened in the last 10 years? It went down to 90, then down to 80. Now it's down to 70. So if you have a fasting blood sugar of 70, that's awesome. So even in my short-term history, 4 or 5 decades of medicine, the fasting blood sugar has gone way down. So now most doctors are on the same page that really blood sugar is one of the inflammatory culprits of coronary artery disease, not the traditional cholesterol hypothesis that we all took the road less traveled on. We all did that one for sure, you know.
It's so true, Dad. And I think people, they're into this pattern of waking up in the morning, getting their orange juice, getting their pastry, whether that's a donut or a bagel. And that's how they start their day. And that they're just setting themselves up for insulin resistance and high glucose levels and all that. So in terms of lifestyle medicine, we can talk about really quickly, what do you do in the morning for high quality food, protein, good fats, right? What do you do, Dad?
Well,
Start your day.
I'm sort of a faster in the morning, but I'll tell you, I used to drink coffee and then I switched to green tea. I'm into green tea right now. All organic green teas, all these different varietals. In fact, I've been doing it every morning, and I like green tea because, you know, it has so many, you know, medicinal properties to it. So right now my beverage is green tea. I don't know how long that'll last. I mean, I do like black tea. And remember, from the Zutland elderly study, it was black tea that contained quercetin, where it demonstrated longevity in these Dutchmen. And again, I've mentioned this many times before, but when I was a young cardiologist, when I was seeing longevity in Dutchmen, you know, above 100 years old, I mean, that was pretty cool to see as a young cardiologist. And when he attributed it to quercetin, oh, that was awesome. So I'm all in on quercetin, and you and I love quercetin. It's one of the best bioflavonoids around. And people can get it from onions, green apples, black tea, and also take it as a supplement. So I just love quercetin.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. So I would say really quickly in terms of if people, they wake up, what do they do? I think intermittent fasting, like what you're doing, Dad, is fantastic. I'm doing the exact same thing as well. I don't do it every morning. I do it probably 3 or 4 mornings out of the week. But if I am going to have a breakfast, I certainly don't reach for a bagel or a pastry. I'll have something like some oatmeal with some dried fruit in it, maybe some ground flaxseed sprinkled on top, or I might have some eggs on a gluten-free piece of toast. But yeah, beginning your day with a healthy meal is really paramount there. Now,
yeah, and you know, one of my favorite, you know, when I do toast, I like to do an avocado toast, you know, with an avocado spread with you add a little olive oil to it, because
healthy fats on top of there.
It's the fats in that olive oil where you don't elicit the insulin response. So if you combine some healthy fats, you know, with some carbohydrate, and if the fats overwhelm the carbohydrate, you get less of an insulin response, because that's what you're really striving for.
Exactly. Now, Dad, you mentioned the whole, you know, inflammation starting from sugar and creating, you know, inflammation in the arteries and such. And the same thing can happen in your gut too. And I want to just briefly address this with our listeners. Make sure that you address food allergies or food sensitivities. Now, this could be a gluten intolerance. This could be a dairy intolerance. This could be to eggs. It could be to citrus. It could be to soy, different preservatives in foods. Make sure that you figure out what it is that you're sensitive to, because if you don't remove those sensitivities or allergies, you're going to be introducing a food into your body all the time that's going to be creating inflammation, which can lead to leaky gut, which can lead to systemic issues in the body. So first and foremost here, we're talking about food, of course. Make sure you're not eating something that is not agreeing with you.
Absolutely. I mean, allergenic foods. And remember, I grew up sort of in that peanut generation where people unknowingly had peanut allergies and were really, you know, being devastated. And I can tell you that I remember flying on airplanes when they were giving out peanuts, and all of a sudden people were choking and, you know, wheezing and stuff like that. So, you know, it took years to really get to these allergic ramifications, but you're right on. Aren't there like 7 or 8 quote, you know, not taboo foods, but foods that are really allergenic, including chicken? I mean, I was surprised to find that one as well.
And, you know, really the best way to do this is like a food elimination diet, which I think you and I've talked about before. And sometimes people don't want to do that. And I completely understand. It's not an easy thing to do. There are food allergy tests out there, food allergy panels that you can have done via blood. And those can be helpful for identifying those hidden foods like chicken, like you just mentioned. So there's a couple out there that I use in my practice, not on a regular basis, but certainly for times where we can't figure out if there is a hidden food that they're reacting to. So thanks for bringing that up, Dad. Now, with certain diets, we can lead to nutrient deficiencies, right? I mean, if people are doing a ketogenic diet or a paleo diet or a low histamine diet or a low oxalate diet, there can be all these nutrient deficiencies that occur. So we want to make sure that we're replenishing the body, you know, making sure that we're not missing something here. When it comes to medications, Dad, let's address that really quickly for our listeners. What are some medications that you want to talk about that lead to nutrient deficiencies?
Well, one of the ones that comes to my mind, because I dealt with it for years, was young women on birth control pills who were deficient in B vitamins. I mean, it was scary stuff.
Yeah.
And I saw that. And finally, the medical profession, got smart, because remember, for years, they didn't recommend vitamin and mineral supplementation. But boy, pregnant women, they needed folic acid. They needed B vitamin support. And I remember seeing that. And, fortunately, when I started to administer vitamins and minerals early, even the pregnant women, given broad vitamin and mineral support, this was a lifesaver for lots of women because, again, I mean, in this day and age, with electromagnetics and insecticides and pesticides and heavy metals in the environment, having a healthy child is really a struggle today. It's a lot more difficult today than it was, decades ago.
Yeah, that's so true. And those birth control pills too, they deplete vitamin C and magnesium and zinc as well, not just the B vitamins. So
right.
And we've got millions of women on birth control pills. Now, another medication that people take often is a PPI, which is a proton pump inhibitor. And these are life-saving medications in terms of people are having an ulcer or they're having a really bad heartburn or they're having gastritis or dyspepsia. It can certainly just calm down those symptoms and get things under control. However, they're prescribed long-term now, right?
Right.
And they're designed to be on a short-term course, but they're given for years and even decades. And I've had people that have been on these medications for 20 years. And so now we know from research that if you're on a PPI, which essentially suppresses your endogenous production of hydrochloric acid, you're going to be more susceptible to fractures or pneumonia or even Clostridium difficile associated diarrhea. So there's lots of long-term ramifications of being on these medications. And these medications as well, the PPIs, also deplete B vitamins and vitamin C and calcium and magnesium as well. So if people are on them, we got to make sure that we're replenishing with a good multivitamin to help those levels.
Right. And I'm so glad you mentioned magnesium. I mean, Drew, as a heart specialist, I am privy to the benefits of magnesium because I used magnesium in the CCU in my early 30s for, horrible refractory, what we call ventricular tachyarrhythmias that were life-threatening. So I sort of grasped the utility of magnesium very early. And let's face it, magnesium has been depleted in the soils for not centuries, but decades. But centuries ago, the soils were replete with magnesium. But the last, I would say, 5 to 6 decades, for some reason, magnesium is depleted, and magnesium deficiencies are rampant in the population. Now, people don't come in and say, "Oh, we have a magnesium deficiency." They come in with possible arrhythmia, possible high blood pressure. In other words, situations like that, or insulin resistance. And I have to tell you that when I was at a CoQ10 meeting, maybe about 12 to 13 years ago, one of the Australian researchers spoke about the benefits of magnesium orotate. And I'll tell you, I was blown away by this. I mean, it was amazing. But I can tell you, I am so glad that Healthy Directions, took the lead with magnesium, because when you use Krebs cycle magnesium components and combine it with magnesium orotate, now you're getting the magnesium Krebs cycle components that you really need, because it's not just taking grandma used to give us, magnesium oxide and milk of magnesia. I don't know if you remember that, but basically
right through,
magnesium oxide stimulates the bowel. You don't really absorb it into the bloodstream.
Yeah.
So when it comes to magnesium, we need these Krebs cycle components that are vitally important. And I was so glad that the Australians introduced me to orotate, over a decade ago.
And Dad, do you think most people should be taking magnesium at this point? I would say so.
Everybody. Yeah. I think this is the unsung hero. This is the one, mineral that I believe we're all depleted in. Now, here's the problem. A lot of doctors check, magnesium, but they check it in the serum. In order to be low in the serum, it's got to be drastically low. You must check an RBC, a red magnesium. Blood cell magnesium, to see if you're depleted in magnesium. And if you're depleted in the red blood cells, then you're really depleted in magnesium. So, no, I take magnesium every night. Drew, I think I mentioned this before on a broadcast. I brush my teeth every night, right? And, when I use my water chaser, I swallow 2 capsules of my broad spectrum magnesium. So it's like clockwork. I take it every night before bedtime.
Yeah, Dad, I'm the same way. I take a sustained release magnesium at night with some CBD, and I have the best sleep ever. I mean, for me, that's my combination.
Well, that's one of the aspects of magnesium. Some people, my patients used to tell me that, Doc, since you put me on magnesium at night, I sleep better.
No, it's so
and
true.
With all the electromagnetics and all the melatonin depletion, from all the EMF in the environment, we need to sleep better. So if magnesium helps these people, so be it.
All right. Well, we talked about birth control. We talked about PPIs. And lastly, I wanted to mention statins. We got to talk about statins now in CoQ10 deficiency. So tell us, Dad, I mean, how bad is CoQ10 depletion with statins? How bad is that?
It's bad, but it didn't come out until the late 1980s. And when I was chief of cardiology at my institution, I used to lecture on statins all the time. I mean, I was a choir boy for statins because I bought the hook, line, and sinker of the statin, story, so to speak. But when this article came out of India showing that statins depleted CoQ10, I go, whoa, I stepped back and I said, how can that be? How can, a pharmaceutical that's allegedly so good for the heart deplete the most important vital nutrient for the heart? So after that, I stopped lecturing for Merck and Pfizer, and basically, I became the choir boy on CoQ10. I really did. And unfortunately, CoQ10 shares the same biochemical pathway as cholesterol. So if you use a cholesterol killer, you're going to knock out that pathway. And that's why so many patients, they don't come into the doctor's office, Drew, and say, oh, Doc, I'm having a statin complication. No, they come in, they go, Doc, I don't have the energy. I don't have the bounce in my step. I can't get out of a chair. I'm weak in my quads. I can't figure it out. I can't play doubles tennis anymore. Those are the complaints I heard. And my first remark was, by the way, does your internist have you on a statin for your cholesterol? And 99% of them would say, yes, they do. So that's how, I interrogated these people because of their symptoms, when they used to share their lifestyle. And again, we started talking about lifestyle. Lifestyle is so important. And that's why lifestyle is a big aspect of really conventional and alternative cardiology.
Well, let's move on to more lifestyle medicine here, Dad. And that is the whole mind-body connection piece. And, recently I just sent you this book, right?
Breathe.
Breathe, right? Or the breath book.
Breath.
I highly recommend everyone watching and listening to this to read this book. It is an amazing, amazing book because you can take control of your breath. When you take control of your breathing, you can help regulate your blood pressure. You can help regulate your energy levels, your sleep. I mean, you can really take control of your physiology and your biology by a simple thing as breathing. So I just completed this book, Dad, and I've been recommending it to everyone because this is something that every single person can start doing right now, which is breathing correctly.
Drew, I'm so glad that you have the passion for the breath because maybe when you read this book, you and I should publish an article in Alternative Medicine because I don't know if you remember this, but I did alternative nostril breathing. And I was hooked up to a HRV, heart rate variability monitor at the same time. And it was amazing how just a few seconds of alternative nostril breathing can regulate your heart rate variability. And to heart specialists like myself, whenever you support heart rate variability, you're supporting your optimum health because disturbed heart rate variability from any cause, whether it's pharmaceutical drugs, whether it's, overzealous use of sugars or preservatives or whatever it is, disturbed heart rate variability, is a harbinger for cardiac events. So we have to be really cautious about it, and supporting heart rate variability is really key.
Yeah. And he talks about heart rate variability in the book. And also what I found fascinating, Dad, is that you can look at someone like Wim Hof. You familiar with the Iceman named Wim Hof? Have you heard of him before?
I've heard of him, yeah.
Guy is just unbelievable. He's climbed Kilimanjaro in t-shirt and shorts. Okay. He can submerge himself in ice water for an hour and a half in ice water and get out of the water without being hypothermic, without shivering, without feeling cold, because he's able to actually regulate his temperature via his breath. So there's all these, like, in a way, superhuman qualities that we can actually develop through the breath. And of course, yogis have been doing this for a long time. You'll read about this shortly, Dad, where they tested a yogi and he was able to change his temperature within seconds from 10 degrees from his finger to his thumb. So there's all these different powers in a way that we can actually start to bring about by breathing. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it, because people can take charge of their health via breathing. And I think all of us are not breathing properly. I mean, that's just the reality of it these days.
You know, Drew, I think you should go down to Cervananda and teach down there. I mean, I taught down at that yoga institute in the Bahamas for almost a decade. And every morning they do a satsang. And, they do these breathing exercises, at 6 o'clock in the morning and again at 10 o'clock at night. And then they go to bed and they repeat that process every day throughout the year. So, I think the breath is really crucial. And the fact that you stumbled upon this book and now you're practicing these exercises is awesome. I mean, you are going to help a lot of our listeners because the breath is really important, vitally important.
Yeah, and let me leave with one more thing here, because I know I've been talking a lot about this, but in his summary, he said that the optimal breath is essentially 5.5 seconds breathing in, 5.5 seconds breathing out, and you repeat that. And so it comes out to be 5.5 breaths per minute. Okay.
Right.
So if people can get a timer on their phone, they can set it for 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out. And then you do that over a minute and you should have 5.5 breaths per minute. And that's what can really lead to increased heart rate variability and all the different positive aspects of breathing.
Now, that is a complete antithesis of the type A personality, because when I met Meyer Friedman for dinner years ago, and he was the one that wrote the book Type A, in Your Heart, I'll never forget it. His research on the breathing patterns in type A behaviors was in and out so quick, not 5 seconds or anything like that. I mean, it was short bursts of activity in and out, and this was the essence of the type A behavior pattern, was the forced breathing and the erratic breathing, not the synchronous breathing that you're talking about, but the erratic type breathing. Meyer Friedman was right on, and this was decades ago. So I'm glad you're bringing it up now because, like anything else, medicine always repeats itself.
It does. It does.
Unfortunately, that's what's happened with the flu. I mean, with this coronavirus, because it's just like 1918 all over again. I'm reading reports from 1918. Because when you read this stuff about 1918, about that flu-like epidemic that devastated, the world, it's exactly the same as it is now.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. And these people back in 1918, they were sitting up, they were struggling to breathe, and they were getting a serosanguinous discharge from their lung, meaning they were getting a hemorrhagic, lesions in the lung and bleeding from the mouth. So it's amazing. It's taken 100 years for this virus to recirculate itself, but history repeats itself again. And that's the way medicine is over and over again. Yeah,
it's very true. Now, Dad, one more thing for Mind Body I wanted to mention is getting out into nature. You and I have talked about this.
Well, you're a nature guy.
I mean, I love nature, of course. But, I was taking a walk the other day, and I realized that when I'm in nature, and I think a lot of people feel this as well, you're at home, because that's where we came from, right? We came from nature. So when you're in nature, you're at home, and that's when you feel really good. And I encourage people as a lifestyle medicine to get out as much as they can. Go for a walk in the neighborhood, go for a walk in the woods. And even I took a video the other day, which maybe I'll post at some point. I filmed a lake, and there was raindrops coming down the lake, and that's all you could hear. And that was the most beautiful thing that I'd heard all day, was just the raindrops hitting the lake, because it was so quiet, so peaceful. And that's what we need in today's world. We need to be at ease. We need to be calmed down. Our nervous systems are so worked up all the time that we need to go out in nature and just listen and observe and be mindful of all these beautiful things around us. So simple thing that people can do on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I can remember when you were a young child, we came across a still lake, out in it could have been in BC, or it was perhaps in Montana. You were about 5 years old, and I took a flat stone and I skirted it across the lake, and it was bobbling back and forth. And you were mesmerized by all the circles around that stone hitting the water. I'll never forget it.
Oh, I love it.
You were, you were sort of a Jeremiah Johnson when you were 5 years old, and now you're the same type of guy. You even have the beard. You even look like a little bit like Redford. So it's kind of cool.
Well, I'm teaching that stuff to my 8-year-old Kai. Yeah,
that's good.
That's good. He's been doing cold immersion with me, so we've been jumping into this cold lake recently. And
you're detoxing the body, huh? You're
detoxing the body.
You're doing a lymph detoxification.
Actually, while we're on the topic here, cold immersion, let me talk really quickly about it, because this is another lifestyle medicine. What you can do is what I'm doing. You go out, you either take a cold shower in your own home, or if you have access to a lake like I do, you go out, you take a dip in the lake. I've worked myself up to around 90 seconds, so about a minute and a half I stay submerged. And it's cold. There's no question about it. You're uncomfortable when you're in there, but when you get out, your body is starting to work really hard. It's a stress that you were just under, and now the blood's pumping, right? Your lymph's pumping as well, and so you're able to increase circulation throughout your body. It helps with pain. It can help with mood. When I get home at night, I feel amazing, Dad. I got to tell you, I mean, like just like the amount of circulation you feel in your hands and your toes and even your brain with cognitive function is unbelievable. So as long as someone doesn't have a, severe cardiac condition where they can't go into extreme temperatures like that, I mean, this is generally a safe treatment for people to do. But I think people should experiment a little bit and see how they feel.
Well, Drew, remember 5 years ago, you wrote in our textbook of cardiology, you did the chapter on, a naturopath's approach to cardiovascular medicine. And one of the things you wrote about was detoxification using a hot cold.
Yes.
And, I have a sauna here in my basement in New England. And whenever I go in a sauna and I'm sweating, the shower is only about 3 feet away. And what I do is I take a cold shower and I do what you taught me. Cold, warm, cold, warm. I keep doing that back and forth because what it does, and you know more about this than I do, I guess it facilitates the lymph flow because the lymph flow is in the superficial aspects of the body or along the thoracic duct. And basically the hot cold is facilitating the lymph, and the lymph is carrying out the toxins of the body. So anybody without a history of heart disease, if they do the hot cold, they're helping to they're literally helping to detoxify the body.
And support the immune system, like you said.
Exactly.
Well, Dad, let's move on to certain tests, health screenings that people should have done on a yearly basis. Let's start off with the heart. What should people get done for tests in terms of the heart?
Oh, I think C-reactive protein is still really cool. I mean, it shows that if you do have a possibility of inflammation, because we know that inflammation is the root cause of heart disease. And while I'm on it, I think any good cardiologist, if they check C-reactive protein, they should look at Lp(a) as well, because that's a pro-inflammatory mediator. It's the real cholesterol story. It's much more common now because of the Biogenome Project. We used to think it was rare, but now it's very, very common. And I like interleukin-6. In other words, these are pro-inflammatory mediators. And even my colleague, Dr. Nicholas Perricone, who was an NF-kappa B guy, I mean, he was the one that really taught me about NF-kappa B decades ago. Any of these inflammatory mediators we can measure. And if you do have them, they do enhance inflammation in the body. Yeah. And by the way, one of the miracle aspects of CoQ10 is that CoQ10 suppresses these inflammatory mediators. So, CoQ10 has enormous utility, not only for the heart, but now I'm reading about more and more papers about, the non-cardiac ramifications of CoQ10, and it's subduing inflammation in this day and age is really cool. That's why CoQ10, I think, is going to be coming, more and more mainstream, particularly, in this era of, inflammation and epidemics, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Dad, you mentioned IL-6. Do you know anything specifically that can help lower that, or is that tied into all the lifestyle stuff that we're discussing today?
Well, interleukin-6, again, it's a pro-inflammatory mediator. So, any of the anti-inflammatories would help. I mean, quercetin may help, omega-3 essential fatty acids, certainly CoQ10, any of these nattokinase, lumbrokinase, any of these things can help to assuage these inflammatory mediators, and even niacin. Now niacin is kind of cool because it's a B vitamin, but what niacin can do is it can intersect some of these inflammatory mediators to a degree, not as much as maybe lumbrokinase or nattokinase, but niacin has an effect on these, and I've seen it. So, the only problem with niacin is it's the flush. A lot of people can't tolerate it. And even in low doses, they get very, very afraid. I've seen panic situations where they get so hot, they get burning and stuff like that. But some people, like the hot flush. So I've had some patients in my cardiovascular practice swear by niacin, and other patients, they couldn't tolerate it at all. It's an individual thing, that's for sure.
And is this something that people build up to, or do they always get that rush?
Yes, they can. They have to start at very low doses. And, niacin was one of my go-tos for lowering Lp(a) or helping to neutralize Lp(a). But again, you had to go to higher and higher doses.
Got it. Okay. Well, Dad, in my practice, it's more, preventative medicine. I'm not treating patients like you were in terms of like heart attacks and all that kind of stuff. But I like to run a CBC, a comprehensive metabolic panel, thyroid panel, hemoglobin A1C, fasting insulin, ferritin and iron, a hormone panel, depending on kind of what someone's coming in for, depending if it's a female or male, but we'll do like an estradiol, progesterone, testosterone, FSH, cortisol, pregnenolone, DHEA. And of course, do a lipid panel with an Lp(a). We'll do a vitamin D, a vitamin B12, including a methylmalonic acid, which is the breakdown product of B12, RBC magnesium, like you mentioned earlier, selenium and zinc. And there's other tests, of course, but that's kind of like what I like to have on a yearly basis are those tests to kind of make sure that we're not missing something and that something's not elevated or low for that matter.
Yeah. And you may have mentioned it, but do you also order a fibrinogen?
On some people, yes. When I suspect that there's a family history of cardiovascular disease, or currently I'm suspecting that, I'll do a fibrinogen.
Yeah, and any postmenopausal woman who smokes, you must get a fibrinogen, because I saw alarmingly high fibrinogens, and I used to think that one of the reasons why heart attacks went up 400% in postmenopausal women. I used to think, when I was a younger cardiologist, it was estrogen because they lost the fountain of youth hormone. But then I realized that the fibrinogens went up. And when the fibrinogens, which causes blood clotting, by the way, the fibrinogens went up because of a lot of smoking. Then I put it two and two together, and I realized that fibrinogen in smoking women postmenopausal was really, really bad. And I had to coach these women in either, lowering fibrinogen, or better yet, getting them off smoking.
And Dad, explain to our audience fibrinogen and how that impacts the blood in terms of making it thick.
Well, it interacts with fibrin, and basically it makes the blood more sludgy. Well, look, if you cut yourself and you're bleeding, you need this stuff because you want your blood to clot. The problem is you don't want your blood to be like red ketchup all the time, sludgy because of these, inflammatory mediators, so to speak, and smoking because, you're not only inhaling, carbon monoxide and stuff like that, but there's like 4,000 chemicals in cigarette smoke because of all the insecticides and pesticides. So, this tends to make the blood sludgy. And we know now that it's sludgy blood or red ketchup blood that is really the essence of inflammation. And we know that inflammation is the essence of heart disease. So keeping the blood like red wine is really key. That's why, I'm a big proponent of grounding. And, again, I like natural blood thinners. So,
exactly.
They're really important.
Okay. And Dad, before we move over to the Wellness Wisdom segment here, is there anything that you want to add into lifestyle medicine that we were talking about today, preventative medicine, anything else?
Yeah, probably we got to talk about stress. I mean, stress is the number one killer. I mean, stress is the elephant in the living room. And especially now in this day and age, and, people need to experience their emotions more. They need to cry more. They need to get into their sadness. They just need to really experience, what they're feeling, because if you just keep stuffing it and stuffing it and stuffing it, it's not good for the heart at all. Remember, the heart is the origin of our total being, so to speak. Yeah. And the heart will suffer if you betray it. And if you don't tell the heart your truth, and you keep betraying it, you keep stuffing the emotions, you're living in denial, so to speak. Yeah. Unfortunately, the heart will come back and get you. That's been my experience.
So, Dad, I think what I like to do, this is hard, right? Because how do you get people to express themselves sometimes? that can be a difficult thing. I like to recommend a journal, or we used to call it like a diary, right? But I think that's a great way for people to sit down at night before they go to bed and write down how they're feeling. What was their day like? What did they experience? What are they feeling in their body at that moment? Because I think it's hard, especially for men, to really feel what they're experiencing, right? In an emotional sense, it's kind of hard if they are having anger or frustration in their life. It's like sometimes it's hard to identify it. And then what do you do when you actually do identify it? I mean, it's not an easy thing. So I think journaling is one way for people to just get down how they're feeling on paper. And then we can learn to do things to help with that.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
In fact, that would be my wellness wisdom.
All right. I like that. Okay.
In fact, I would say this. My wellness wisdom today with you, Drew, is that before you go to bed tonight, write down one thing that you are grateful for before you go to sleep, or one thing that day that you learned intrinsically, in your inner being that you are grateful for.
Yes. That's beautiful, Dad. That's the gratitude journal.
The gratitude journal, because
Yes.
whenever you're grateful, what are you doing? You're supporting heart rate variability. Whenever you support heart rate variability, you're optimizing your cardiovascular health. And whenever you're grateful, I got the universal chill on that. Whenever you're grateful, you're in a state of well-being. And and listen, what's the opposite of grateful? Well, it could be panic, it could be, depression, it could be anger, it could be, any of those, negative emotions. So when you're grateful, you're experiencing something that's really full and genuine for the heart.
Yeah. Oh, I love it, Dad. I love it. Well, for my wellness wisdom, I'm going to say that start doing these things right now. What we talked about today, including the breathing piece, you can do it right now after listening or watching this podcast. And the simple thing that my father and I discussed was, hey, the 5.5 breaths in, 5.5 breaths out. And then you do that 5.5 times during a minute. And it's almost like you think about the tide coming in or the tide going out, or a wave coming onto shore and a wave coming out. It's the same kind of motion. You're doing that with your lungs instead of obviously water. But that's something that everyone can do today, right now, even in this moment. You can start doing while you're listening or watching this. And we know it's good for your health.
And your heart rate variability.
And your heart rate variability.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dad, thanks so much for coming on the show today. And this was great. I'm so happy we talked about lifestyle medicine. It's such an important piece of people's health.
Ditto. That was great, Drew.
That's our show for today, folks. If you have a question or an idea for a show topic, please send us an email or share a post with us on Facebook. And remember, if you like what you heard today and you want to be an active member of the Be Healthistic community, subscribe to our podcast at BeHealthisticPodcast.com or on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your favorites. You can also find more great content and information from us and the Healthy Directions team at healthydirections.com. I'm Dr. Drew Sinatra.
And I'm Dr. Steve Sinatra.
And this is Be Healthistic.
Thanks for listening to Be Healthistic, powered by our friends at Healthy Directions with Doctors Drew and Steve Sinatra. See you next time.